I'd like to call the study session of the Mahomet-Seymour Board of Education to order. It is 7 p.m. on Monday, November 4th. At this time, if you're a guest, I'd like to ask you to sign in if you haven't already, and thank those who have for doing that. Remind everyone to silence their cell phones, and remind visitors that in order to have an effective meeting tonight, if you wish to make comments to the board, please read the visitor guidelines that are posted outside the door. Fill out one of the orange participation sheets and get those to Dawn in the next couple of minutes, please. We have roll call.
Giles.
Yes. Here.
Keith. Henricks.
Here.
Schultz. Here. Larson. Here. Hennessy. Here. McComb.
Here. And would you join me in standing for the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Board members, you've been able to review the agenda for tonight's meeting. Basically, this is a study session for school improvement plans. There will be a closed session where we talk about a couple of items at the end. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. Is there any public comment? Okay, so first up is school improvement plans. Before we get there, I know Colleen had something that she wanted to mention about last meeting's.
Well, I just wanted really briefly, I sort of heard us express that we would like meetings to maybe run more efficiently. And so I wanted to just throw out this suggestion to the board and see what you guys thought about this. That maybe we take things like, for example, the resolutions. And Lindsay gave us that packet. We could read that packet. And then when we came to the meeting, we could run it a little bit like a consent agenda. Like, we've read these, and the motion could be, we vote to approve them, say according to the ASB recommendations, unless someone wants to take one out. So then I might say, like, I want number 1 taken out so we could discuss it. So then we could have a discussion about it, anyone else wanted. But otherwise, we could just say,
Oh, the resolutions.
right, like, we approve the we agree to go with the IASB unless someone wants to talk about it, because I don't want to shut down anyone's discussion of it, but that way we wouldn't have to read 18 resolutions aloud, talk about each resolution, because that's something we could just read ourselves. Or even like the press policy that's going to come up that's 500 pages long. Seems like maybe if we wanted to, we could say, press recommended all these policies, we'll read them, and then if we don't want one, or we want to talk about one before we say we want it, we could talk about it, and then maybe that would help move things along. But I didn't want to make anyone feel like I didn't want them to speak or say anything. So I was just throwing that out as a suggestion for efficiency to kind of move things along.
I would agree when we get to especially the ISB resolutions. I don't know that we vote on each one. I think we probably do something along the lines you were suggested, where we vote to go with the recommendations except for certain ones that we want to discuss more, and then just spend our time discussing the ones we want to. I think that makes sense.
And just other things that we, if there's anything we could have as a report instead of a presentation, then we could save time. That's just my idea to reflect what we talked about. If that is what people want to do.
Well, school improvement plans is always an exciting meeting, and our administrators are here to share with us what's going on. And we're going to start with Dr. Rummel, who's going to kind of give an overview for the district, and then I think we're going to go building by building after that. So Dr. Rummel.
Dr. Rummel is going to give us an overview of the Illinois School Report Card, and then we'll move into the school improvement plans.
So I believe tomorrow Link will go home with
Not tonight.
tonight, okay, for the school report card. So I'm just gonna touch on a few things. We could be here for much, much longer this evening trying to go through everything. But I would just like to touch on a few of the highlights. So if we start here on the first page with the district snapshot, I thought I'd start by just pointing out, we've talked a lot, or Trent's talked a lot about the evidence-based funding, and here it just highlights that we're at 66% financial capacity right now. So we're closing that gap, but not quite there yet. In terms of finance, there's also a new piece to the school report card this year, and that is per pupil expenditures by building. So in the past, it's been reported by the district as a whole, and this year it's reported by building. And you can see we're pretty consistent across the 3 schools, with the per pupil expenditures being slightly greater at the high school. And you would see that in every unit district. It's very normal. The high school has courses that are just unique, that are more expensive to run, as you would expect. Like family consumer science classes, shop classes, construction, they're just more expensive classes. Additionally, let's say K-8, your class size typically would remain pretty consistent from class to class, right? So one 3rd grade class might have 25 kids, the next 3rd grade class is going to have 25 kids. When we get to the high school, we have some singleton and some specialty area classes where class sizes might run just slightly smaller and would increase the overall cost then per student in those areas. So if we move to, is there any questions on those before I go ahead? All right, so if we move to academic progress, you'll see the district is represented in the light green. The state is represented by the dark green. We're above the state average for IAR, which was formerly known as PARC, and SAT. The other area here that I want to talk about, though, is the growth for IAR. So I want to be clear as to what that is reporting. When we're talking about growth, what we're looking at is, let's say a student scored 725 on the 3rd grade IAR score. What we're looking at here then is that student compared to every other student that scored a 725 on the 3rd grade. Was their growth greater or less than other students when they took the 4th grade assessment? So that's kind of what that growth piece is there. It's not necessarily just looking at individual growth, it's that comparison to other students. And if you are interested in the test before, because I'm going to show you a little bit with our scores there, you'll have to go down to retired tests if you want to look at PARC. Even though the test is very similar, and even though it was still kind of in the Pearson model last year, it was a different test, and you will have to look in a separate place to get those scores. So while all of this is good, I do want to point out that we still have areas for growth, and that here you can see that would be our students, our low-income students, and our students with IEPs. So looking on the IAR, the district, and then the state, we continue to have a gap in performance between students with disabilities and students without disabilities, and low-income and non-low-income students. And that's consistent from ELA to math, as well as from IAR to SAT. So, click there and add the IEPs too. So the other area I thought I would touch on real quick that can be confusing, here's like the overall demographics of our students. And I thought I'd touch a little bit on this chronic absenteeism versus chronic truancy. So when we talk about chronic absenteeism, we're looking at students that miss 10% or more of any given school year with excused or unexcused absences. So even absences that we excuse, if a student misses more than 10 days, they still are 10% of the school year, so it'd be about 17 or 18 days, they're still going to fall under chronic absenteeism. But here, if you look at chronic truancy, we're at 3%, the state is just over 13%. These are students that miss 5% or more of the school year with unexcused absences. So those are kids that, that are really at risk for dropping out of school, at risk for failure. So this is, we should be very proud of that number. We'd ideally like it to be at 0, but 3% when the state average is 13 is really good. So if at any time you want to dig deeper and you want to look not just at the district as a whole, you can click on schools in a district, and then you can go and get the information specifically to any of the individual schools that you want to look at. It's going to be slightly different for Middletown because they don't administer a state standardized test for achievement. They do administer the kids, which is a kindergarten assessment there, but that's just looking, it's given, I believe, Ryan, is it the 40th day of school? And they're just looking at what skills students are entering kindergarten with, or what skills students are lacking when they enter kindergarten. So it's more of just an indicator of how prepared kids are for school, not necessarily a reflection of what kids are doing in school. And then you can see here the 3 schools with standardized testing all came under the second category of commendable. Questions on school?
What are the other categories?
You exemplary, which is the top category, and then you've got 2 different areas of needs improvement and unsatisfied. I don't know exactly what these are called. Do you remember? I'm gonna say it. I don't know. We don't have any there. Needs improvement, maybe, or unsatisfactory.
So the summative designation is determined under the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was the federal law that governs public K-12
So
education.
underperforming and lowest performing. So not failure, just lowest.
Oh, yeah,
So
want to be kind.
yes. All right. Other questions? All right. So the other thing I'm going to report on tonight is school improvement plan progress from last year. So with 3 new building principals, thought it would be appropriate. I'm going to report on progress for the school improvement plans from last year. So I've combined Middletown and Lincoln Trail because their goals were so similar. So ideally at any point in the year, we want 85% of our students at or above the 20th percentile for math. And what this does is when we have 85% or more of our students above the 20th percentile, which would be at grade level or within the normal range, it's telling us that our core instruction is working. And then we can use tier 2, tier 3 interventions and supports for that bottom 15% of students. We're not going to get to 100% because it's a percentile. So somebody has to be in the bottom at some point, but we want to try to keep at that 85%. And here you can see I tried to put a line there, and so we're right where we need to be in most areas, just a little bit low there. And the reason I can tell you that second grade for reading is a little bit low is because that's the first time students are taking the test that's not read to them. So the test is read to them in first grade, and on second grade, it's the first time they're independently reading it themselves. We used to wait and do that in third grade. When we did that, you saw the same dip in third grade reading. But because our kids, we have a lot of kids that are proficient in reading in second grade, we decided to get them, so we could get a more accurate measure, we moved that down to second grade last year. And kindergarten is not reported on there, but I will share that 83% of kindergartners were reading at or above grade level by the end of the year last year. The other goal that MPE and Lincoln Trail had last year was related to social and emotional needs of our students. And so we really kicked that off in August last year with an introduction to responsive classroom. We really built up our professional development library and had about 25 teachers go through level 1 training this past June. And they've really been the leaders, leading out professional development, serving as a resource to other teachers in the buildings. And this is going to be followed up next week. Our trainer is coming back to do like a follow-up with us. So she's not here necessarily to evaluate how we're doing with responsive classroom. She's coming in to check to see what areas we're strong in and what areas she can help guide us towards the next areas for professional development. So we're excited about that. And then we move to a multi-tiered levels of support. So we've always addressed students with their academic needs, but now using that team to also address and support students who might be struggling with behaviors. So the junior high also had a social, emotional, and academic goal for last year. They reestablished their PBIS team, which partners very well with Responsive Classroom that they're also doing at the junior high. And then they had an instructional goal or an academic goal to analyze park data and use that to drive instruction. And the grade level teams with their team leaders did a great job at looking at some reports that are broken down by standard and looking at what areas, first looking to say, okay, is this a standard that we teach before the assessment or a standard that we teach after the assessment, right? And if it's one we teach before the assessment, really being able to look at how are we teaching it, what is the standard asking versus how that standard is assessed. And we're able to make some shifts accordingly. And then the last would be the high school, who also, again, had an academic and a socially emotional goals. So they redeveloped their RTI team, much like Lincoln Trail and MPE, really began to add a space for addressing social and behavioral needs of students. So while they've had RTI, they've always looked at the academic needs, now really beginning to address some of those social emotional needs as well. They wanted to review dual credit, advanced placement, and other off-campus opportunities for students. This will continue to be ongoing. At the next board meeting, we'll have a proposal for a new advanced placement class for next school year at the high school. I've reached out again to Parkland regarding some dual credit opportunities. We'll continue to try to work with them and try to bring new opportunities. It's just different community colleges just work a little differently across the state. So there can be challenges with that. And their last goal then was to achieve a composite score on the SAT of 1200. The composite score they reached this is for kids taking the SAT on the school administered SAT day in the spring. And so it was, you can see, an 1126. So we'll continue to want to hit that target, that ambitious target of 1200. But it's a new group of kids every year. So one of the things that we have in place now, I think this will be the second or third year that the state will be paying for the PSAT 9 and 10. So we can at least kind of begin to track how kids are doing as they move from PSAT 9 to 10 and then to take the SAT their junior year. And then last year was the first year that we added the PSAT 8 here, and the state doesn't pay for that, but we felt like it's a value to kind of know where our kids are on that path so we can begin to make shifts and adjustments as necessary. So any questions on last year's goals?
Why did we pick 1200 for an SAT?
So I think that is just like where you have a lot of really high achieving high schools might be in that 1200 score, and so that's a pretty ambitious goal. I think it's something we'd like to reach at some point.
The composite for the previous year was like 1170-ish, so this seemed like it was reasonable. So we actually went down a little bit, but again, this is a
New group of kids every year.
Every year. It doesn't represent academic growth, it just represents a snapshot of their performance.
And we have made some shifts to the SAT prep class, and we continue to monitor that as new information comes out. Other questions? All right, I will turn it over. I don't know who's up next.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Anybody have an update on volleyball news?
25, 23.
I saw the way they're doing it.
All right, well, thank you guys for listening to Middletown specifically talking about Middletown school improvement plan today. I'm going to go through and then answer any questions at the end. I want to start off by telling you the process that I went through when coming up with the school improvement plan. It was my understanding in past practice that the principal would spend some time over the summer and would write the 3 goals for the school. I wanted more buy-in from my teachers and my staff and get some more ideas to where I feel like it was something that needed to be involved with our staff, so I did that. I also looked at what's called the 5 Essential Survey data that was given to teachers and given to parents, and I really dissected that to come up with my #1 goal, which I'll talk about in a bit. I reestablished a leadership team that was created last year. I established it again this year and really relied on them for some realistic goals for literacy and math at this level. I established 3 of the highest needs based on a survey given at the end of last year, and Middletown was loud and clear that communication was something that needed to be improved on. The master schedule needed to be improved, and last year being the first year that Sangamon and Middletown joined together, that common language and unity of the building needed to be worked on. So I kept those in mind to really focus in on my #1 goal for school improvement. Along the process, I utilized Kim Johnson, our instructional coach at our level, as well as our lead interventionist, Felicia Paraguay, and we also have 3 admin interns who are going through their process through the University of Illinois to become possible administrators in the future. And those 3 also helped look at some data, come up with some realistic goals at this level. So then I communicated my first goal that I did right over the summer with my leadership team and discussed the process that I went through on that. And I also told them I want to use them, utilize the team to come up and help me with literacy goals and math goals that I was not comfortable writing and setting without their input. And that was back on August of 28th of this school year. After that, I communicated goals to the whole staff on October 7th at a staff meeting. And then tonight I'm here with you communicating to the school board. So my first and most important goal, in my opinion, is a social-emotional goal. It reads, the Middletown Prairie Elementary Administration and staff will work together to build a strong climate and culture where staff members want to come to school each day to positively impact students' lives. The rationale for this goal is when I dissected the 5 Essential Survey, this was very blaring, jumped out at me that 26% of the staff members in this building disagreed with the statement that says, I usually look forward to each working day in this school. So it very clearly tells me, if you're not wanting to be here, you're not going to be the most effective for kids. And the reading and the writing and the math and all that is going to be secondary if we don't have a staff here that's ready to, on a daily basis and wants to be here. So this has been where I put a lot of my effort, a lot of my time, and utilize my staff to come up with some ideas and ways to help our culture and climate improve, which I'll discuss right now. So the communication factor I discussed earlier, I established what's called the FYI. That's just a weekly newsletter that I send out over email. I try to do it on Fridays. Sometimes it gets on over the weekend, but I make sure before Monday morning, the staff has a kind of a update of what's going on throughout the week, look at things that are on our calendar, so communication pieces that is very beneficial to everyone who works with students, especially those that don't have homeroom classes, but a speech teacher, a special ed teacher. That way it can communicate to them when a classroom is on a field trip, and they can plan accordingly if they're going to miss minutes with their student on their IEPs. I've had some positive feedback on this tool. It's been very helpful. I spent numerous hours this summer trying to create a master schedule. Being my first time in this position, that was a very challenging task, but I feel I addressed a lot of the needs that the building was really screaming for. One of the things that I changed, we had kindergarten specials at the end of the day last year. You figured out very quickly that was not a good idea with the physical space and the time it takes the kindergarten class to get from one end of the building to the other, and then try getting them to the right places at the end of the day for buses and car pickup and kids club. It wasn't ideal, so we changed that. Collabs is something we do every other week where, according to the schedule, I allow the teachers to get together on what we have a double special day, we call that, where they have library on top of their special they go to. And I had to be very creative to not have those collabs scheduled on Wednesday afternoons, because once a month we have early outs, and that same group would constantly miss a time with collabs. I had to figure out how to make those up and contractually keep that within the right language. That was tough, so I avoided that on this schedule. There were small pockets of time where you'd have 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, where it's really tough for teachers to teach a lesson or get anything productive in on the last schedule. So I was able to eliminate For the most part, small intervals that just made it tough to do everything. And I had to get really creative to come up with some common team time. And really for kindergarten, the first and second grade already had something established at Sangamon, and they brought that over to Middletown, where every other week they would work with each other and have buddy reading rooms. And the first grade teacher would have that room and would watch the second grade and the first grade together, while the other teachers were getting together and having the team time where all 10 second grade teachers could get together from 8 to 8:25 and have a meeting with all the teachers in the same room. The kindergarten wanted that too, and I didn't blame them. So I was able to be creative with that and organize the staff members who do not have a homeroom teacher, and they were able to utilize their time and help out, supervise somebody reading classrooms within the kindergarten, or just utilize the playground where they can have a little bit more of extra 5 minutes of recess while they are supervising them, so that the kindergarten team can also have this time. And I think they are very appreciative, the staff is very appreciative of this time. For common language, Mr. Day, our assistant principal, and I have been working together, collaborating to come up with weekly videos that we send out via a link to our staff, and the kids have really, really enjoyed them, and the teachers have. I hear all the time walking down the hallway, "I saw your video, Mr. Martin," and it's really gets me excited that they're excited, and they're singing these little cheesy songs that, are going over our 3 rules: be respectful, be responsible, and be safe. And to have, just the other day, I have a kindergarten student that was at a basketball tournament, and he was able to recite those rules and give me some of the things that we're trying to teach in those videos, and that really got me excited that, what we're trying to do, this language is going on. And if a kindergarten's retaining that, I think that's pretty impressive. We have a social committee that is also working on the culture and climate. The most recent activity was a scavenger hunt. We had a really, really good time trying to mix and match different people from Old Sangamon and Old Middletown. Now we're one, and trying to mix the teams up and bond over a silly running around town, taking pictures, finding things, and it was a really good time, and I think it made some good bonds with our staff. Going into Goal 2, literacy. I tried to make one simple statement that covered all 3 grades, but I found it very difficult, as you have a kid coming into kindergarten and a kid up in 2nd grade. It's just such a wide variety of ranges that we have here that I did end up dissecting it down per grade level. But the overall goal statement is that all kindergarten through 2nd grade students will make individual progress towards their individual literacy goals. And it breaks down for kindergarten, really looking at letters. 90% of the kindergarten students will know their letters by the school year end, and then 80% of the kindergarten students will know their 26-letter sounds by the end of the school year. And I got all of these numbers through our leadership team and our interns who talked and communicated with kindergarten staff to make sure that these are realistic goals. I have not taught kindergarten. I did not want to set a goal that wasn't realistic. So that was, I feel, pretty beneficial. 1st grade, 75% of all 1st grade students will be reading at an independent level I by the end of the school year. In 2nd grade, 75% of 2nd grade students will be reading at an independent level M by the end of the school year. Let me explain what that means a little bit. So our district has adopted the Jan Richardson program that really focuses in on our guided reading, and we really want to get our students at the guided reading table with the teacher in small groups at the level that the kids are reading at. And a lot of our professional development over the past 2.5 years, our class has been focused around Jan Richardson and the Daily 5 model of how to teach guided reading. And I thought it was important that we emphasize that in our school improvement goal, that by the end of 1st grade, we would like most of our kids going into the next grade at independent level I. And that aligns with the Jan Richardson, what she would recommend at the end of the year. That's where I got those letters. Reason for goal: improving the teaching and learning while implementing data-driven decisions in reading. So what's happening? We're looking at map data. Teachers are collecting running records. The teachers collect MSEL data in kindergarten and also DIPLs to identify students that qualify for MTSS supports. We use differentiated instruction during our ELA block through that Daily 5 method I was discussing. There's the implementation of Jan Richardson framework for guided reading. execution of the Wonders curriculum in whole group, and utilizing that Daily 5 workshop model. My final goal is a math goal. Again, I want to dissect that down as kindergarten versus second is so unique. Overall goal is that all kindergarten through second grade students will make individual progress towards their numeracy goals. For kindergarten, that means numbers. 70% of all kindergarten students will know their numbers, counting to 100 a year. And then 75% of those students will be able to identify the numbers 1 through 20, which is a completely different skill than be able to count at the end of the school year. First grade, 75% of all first grade students will meet the projected RIT growth measurement goal from fall to spring as determined by MAP and math. And I'll explain that here in a minute, what that means. In second grade, 60% of all second grade students will meet the projected RIT growth measurement goal from fall to spring as determined by MAP and math. And I want to really talk about, if you don't know what's going on with this, you look at that. Why is it 75% from first grade jump all the way down to 60% in second grade? And Dr. Rummel prefaced this before. That's a huge jump in test. There's a K through 2 test that has been given in MAP for many years. My understanding is Mahomet's done really, really well on that K through test. At the second grade level, it was recommended that the data they were getting is not useful, as the majority were doing so well in it, that they decided to move us to the harder test in second grade and make that jump earlier instead of third grade to second grade, and give that 2 through 5 test. And what we're noticing is, it's not just a math test, it's also a reading test because it's not being read to them. So that 60% isn't necessarily just for the math, what they can do in math, but really what they can do through reading and being able to do the math problems. So it's a tough test, it's a difficult test. I think 60% is still a lofty goal. At second grade, I don't think that that's a guaranteed hit right there, as it is a difficult test. And I know last year was our first year we gave it, and I know a lot of teachers came to me saying this isn't a fair test for these kids. And at the same time, I said, well, we're setting the bar high, and we're going to see what our data is going to say, and we can't see some improvement. As far as the RIT growth, what that means is it's very interesting. As I have not worked with MAP until I came to Mahomet, so I'm learning a lot with this. And my understanding is that each kid has their own individual RIT growth because the MAP test is able to do that. The MAP test is able to go in, and my daughter's name is Ashley, so if she's taking this test in second grade and she gets one right, it gets a little harder. Gets one wrong, it gets a little easier. It kind of adapts to the kid, and if it goes and they're just not doing very well, it kind of shuts down, and the data is where it is, but it's individual. Ashley will have her own RIT score, own RIT growth compared to all the other second grade. And I think that's really important for us to know that, 75% for each RIT growth, that's going to be tough for those kids that start off really, really high and do really great. It's not a benchmark that we're trying to meet. We're trying to meet their individual growth. So I think it's really good to look at that we are, differentiating and looking at growth for all kids. So what are we doing already? The missile data is also in kindergarten for math as it is in reading. We have the implementation of the Go Math curriculum. I'm really excited about Dreambox. This is a new online program that we started this year. We were able to utilize some of the Chromebook recycle program from the junior high when they go from the 8th grade into high school. They turn in their Chromebooks. We were able to get some of those through Jared Lynn. I was able to get those in the hands of our first and second grade teachers. Like to maybe eventually push that out to our kindergarten teachers as well. It's also very similar to where the math program is able to differentiate within the program, and kids can be challenged appropriately in Dreambox. And last thing, differentiated instruction for students using the learning continuum map. I think that's it. Questions? Bro.
If I'm hearing you right, you're giving second graders story problems for math, and more than half of them can do it. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Put that language we understand.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and it's pretty exciting to see it. Just if you were to look at the data, just not understanding that part of it, it's a head scratcher. But knowing that it is a big jump, and it's story problems and reading, and they're able to do some pretty awesome things at a young level. It's really neat.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Ryan, I really trust you and your staff on goals 2 and 3, and I think those are, I'm sure, have been well thought out. But I'm really impressed with goal number 1. It was clear last year that climate and culture in this building and turning that was job 1.
Yep.
And not only do you recognize that, your goals reflect that, but what we're hearing is we're getting improvement.
I appreciate that. We're working hard. We're working hard together.
And you've been the catalyst for that, and I want you to appreciate that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I was really impressed to hear that you looked at the feedback from the teachers to do that, and then even on goals 2 and 3, to reach out to the teachers to include them. I was really impressed that you wanted to make those goals realistic and take the feedback.
Thanks. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, Lincoln Trail. So I want to share a little bit of background information about kind of how we came to this plan and how we came to this place as well. Because this work started, I think even before school started, just really diving headfirst into data. I had a wonderful group of, I have an entire wonderful group of staff, but I had a group that volunteered to kind of help dive into this with me and look at those goals with me. Again, as Ryan mentioned, this was something that, the principal had sort of done in isolation before, and it's not my school, it's not my school improvement plan, and so I really wanted some feedback from staff, so I thank them for that. So I was fortunate enough to have all grade levels represented, special ed, staff, interventionists, encore, and then also teaching assistants were part of that team, so I was blessed to have all of them participate in that. And through conversation, it was really important for Lincoln Trail staff to focus on how we can improve instruction, not necessarily just looking at test scores, because it was clear that we feel that students are more than just a score, and we really want to look at what are the steps in order to take us to, that will ultimately lead to those improved scores. Because when the goal was originally just this outcome of map and being at this certain place or this certain number, it didn't really give us the roadmap to get there. So that's what we hope that we have put together is sort of more of a roadmap for what are those building blocks for improving instruction. So our first goal is for literacy, and we, as Ryan mentioned, are tackling guided reading and look to be fully implementing that by the end of next school year. So what guided reading is basically just a small group instructional context where teachers are supporting each reader's development of systems and processing new texts at increasingly challenging levels of difficulty. So when they're working at the table with those small groups of students, they're stretching them in ways and getting them to process the text at increasing levels, but with support. So sort of that fail forward idea as our teachers are working with those students. And then students are able to process and apply that literacy power to all different texts and across different curriculum. Students above grade level would receive, and again, these are using the Jan Richardson levels that we use for, I call benchmark assessments, so that will depend on whether the student's a 3rd grader, 4th grader, 5th grader. But above grade level students, they're meeting with teachers twice a week to kind of extend what they're able to do with text and the way that they're able to comprehend text. Our students on grade level are meeting at least 3 times a week, and then students below grade level are receiving that instruction 4 times per week. That would be in addition to any additional tiered services that they're receiving. So all students are receiving that whole group instruction where the teacher's modeling what that comprehension skill is with a common text. And then students are working with text at their level to practice that skill on their own. And then our staff is going to be looking to develop a common fidelity checklist that we'll be using so that we can make sure that the components that we need to have during those guided reading lessons are there. It's just kind of a self-check for them.
And they're creating their own, is that what you said?
We're looking at, so I have several ones, like Jan Richardson has a couple, she has a new book out that has a different one. But what we really want to focus on are what do we need? what do our staff, I would rather us focus on doing 2 things really, really well than try to cover 25 things and maybe not do so well. So sort of laser focus our efforts on a couple of things and then, okay, so what's next? And then always be looking forward with that. As a former teacher who taught guided reading, the fidelity checklist was the best thing for me as a teacher to make sure I was getting to what I needed to get to and really improve how I taught students. All right, so the other big thing that's really sort of tied to reading is to writing. And so we are taking on Lucy Calkins' units of study, which will be starting with some professional development for all staff in this coming January at one of our Institute days. We've already developed a writers cohort, which is a group of our staff at Lincoln Trail that will be, they've sort of already embraced Lucy and have been trying some different things and really diving into that professional development on their own. And we'll lead out that professional development for the rest of our staff. So that will provide all students an opportunity to receive that whole group instruction of modeling for whatever the lesson sort of has in place for them that day. All students will receive that modeling. All students will receive conferencing about their individual writing. And then the teacher will be able to tailor their instruction to fit what the needs of the students are through that small group opportunities as well. And then writing checklists will be used to offer students feedback. Lucy has a lot of rubrics. Anybody who's taught Lucy sort of like knows the rubrics. And while that's great information to have, it's better for students, and I think it's better for us that are teaching to see what are the needs of our students by focusing on those writing checklists, so we can really talk with students and conference with students about these are the things that I see that you are doing well, here's some areas for improvement, and then provide instruction for how to do that. And then our last goal is social emotional learning. As Nicole mentioned, this was a focus for us last year. However, meeting the needs of our students never ever changes. I mean, their needs change, but us trying to meet their needs never changes. So we had additional staff that went to responsive classroom training over the summer, and they have been leading some of the professional development that we've had ongoing throughout the rest of the year. Our goals being that all classrooms would be holding morning meetings by the end of the school year, and we are there. Darren and I actually had the opportunity to help lead some of those morning meetings this year and participate in some of those morning meetings this year, and that's been a joy to be back in the classroom in that capacity. Positive referrals exceeding disciplinary referrals. We did that last month with over 100 positive referrals written for the month of October. But we still have some areas where things go sideways, right, and things go left. And so really having those problem-solving meetings with our staff where we're looking at behavioral data to see how can we support those students and what can we do for kids, what can we do with kids, not what can we do to kids. And that comes with additional professional development for our staff through some of those areas of teacher language and interactive modeling, which is crucial to the responsive classroom. And then another thing that we're working on is social and academic instructional groups are currently being developed. Our school social worker and Mr. O'Connell are working on what that curriculum might look like and what are some needs of our students and how can we meet those. And so hopefully those will be meeting in the new year as well. We also have an attendance committee that is formed to help address some of the issues related to chronic absenteeism. So that group is meeting and looking and again, problem solving for what can we do for kids, what can we do with kids. All right, any questions for me? Yes, Merle.
Kudos on the positive referrals and so forth, and that would seem to work very well at the macro level. Do you stratify that data and also look at it, how does that translate to the individual kid level that's actually high on the disciplinary?
So that's one thing that we have a multi-tiered systems of support team that meets and looks at that data and is really analyzing, okay, so what is student A, kind of what are the issues here? and how can we help them and problem solve for them, and what supports can we put into place rather than just keep writing the office referrals. So we're blessed that we don't have a lot of the negative, but it doesn't mean that we can turn a blind eye to that either, because I mean that behavior is communication, right? And that's just often demonstrating an unmet need. And if there's a way that we can meet that, then kids deserve that.
And you can spend a whole lot of time on that, just that one behavior.
Yes, yes.
And energy.
Other questions for Megan?
Good job.
Thanks for starting on that so early in the summer and getting that.
Hey, I could not have done it without my
Your
team
group.
and that group that
But just
wanted to take
include
that on.
people again.
It was early, but I knew it needed to be done, and it's a huge undertaking to get to that point. And the work doesn't stop here. I mean, that's something that we have to keep looking at all year long and working together on. And just really, I mean, we thought we dove into data, now we're trying to swim through the data, I think. But we'll get there, and that Lincoln Trail team will help lead that, so.
And the alignment of the Jan Richardson throughout, that's nice to hear from your building and that building for going up.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Just want to share what we have going on for our school improvement plan at the junior high. Being the second year, kind of last year spent a lot of time just listening and diving into the needs of the building, students and staff, and parents. Made some pretty big schedule changes, which have worked out very well, at least the feedback that we've gotten, and you know, from all the stakeholders, parents, students, and staff. So as far as this year's school improvement plan, the process, we analyzed over the summer. We dove right into this. We had a team leader retreat mid to late summer, and just kind of looked at the results of what the students had to say, what our parents had to say, and then also what the staff had to say, and really kind of what are we doing well, what do we need to work on, okay? We took a faculty meeting, and the staff then analyzed the 5 essential survey results. Again, they looked at what parents had to say, what the students had to say, and then what themselves they had to share. So kind of the big things that kind of popped out for everyone were social emotional learning, what are we doing to help with that? And then really the other one was vertical time for curriculum. Our schedule lends itself to meeting grade level wise, but not necessarily across grade level, okay? And since we went to the team model, I think going on 7 years ago, that was lacking big time, okay? So maybe 8th grade doesn't necessarily know what 7th grade is doing, so on and so forth. So those were the two things that kind of popped out through all these conversations. So brought it back to the team leaders, discussed it, and then also a lot of collaboration with Dr. Rummel to come up with our goals for the year. So goal 1 and 3 are pancaking our curriculum, but 1 and 3 are social emotional. With the change in schedule, we added a little bit more time in our Bulldog Power Hour at the end of the day to allow for responsive classroom, which is goal number 3. That time for social emotional is built in every single day. So leading with goal number 1, it's building off last year, kind of revitalizing that PBIS team. And this, you know, positive behavior intervention system, just school-wide, what are our expectations? You know, be safe, be respectful, be responsible. We teach this every day during announcements. There's something that's highlighted, whether that's bus, whether that's recess, whether that is lunch, hallway behavior, bathroom etiquette, so on and so forth. Those are hit on every single day in our morning announcements. We are building on last year. We had some really good things put in place, but our tier 2, tier 3 were kind of lacking as we developed what we want to do as a school.
This year, the Tier 2 and Tier 3 team is really moving forward. For instance, in the last couple of weeks, analyzing the data for students that get ERs, which is not extra recess in our building, like it is in Lincoln Trail. It is expectation reminders, okay? So analyzing that and basically saying, all right, those kids that are getting X, whatever that X was, amount of ERs, what can we do to help them? So specifically, we put them in a mandatory check-in, check-out system, all right? For the most part in our day, it's built in that the first hour teacher, who the students start with, end their day with the Bulldog Power Hour teacher, okay? So those students who have X amount of ERs, that teacher can check in with them, have a conversation. We're gonna have a positive conversation. We're gonna have a good day, so on and so forth, and then they can end the day with, how was your day? Okay, it didn't go well here, why? What can we do better? Having those conversations is very, very important. And just building that relationship with the students. So we'll continue with PBIS across the board for all of our students. We're doing some good things with, for instance, a student won a limo ride last week, which it couldn't happen to a better student, a nicer kid who's had a lot go on the last couple of years. But just to see him gleam and actually talk about wanting to win that for like the last month, and he won it, was pretty cool, pretty satisfying. So. And him, I think he had 6 friends, rode a limo to their junior high dance. Small thing, but huge for him to always remember. So, moving on to goal number 2. Specifically, we just started with ELA teachers, that we will review and analyze current 6th through 8th grade ELA curriculum. This will ensure that current curriculum and instructional practices lead to high quality learning for all students. So this is it's modeling what Dr. Rommel's done with the vertical teams, K-12. Being a part of 2 different teams, one last year, one this year. It went very well, and it's very interesting to have the conversations of a kindergarten teacher perspective and also someone who teaches calc at the high school in the same room discussing that. So we're gonna model that, and during our school improvement time, early dismissal, we've been meeting, half the time has been on responsive classroom, the other half has been vertical time for our staff. We have a time planned in January where we're going to get some subs in the building and really dive into the needs and what's best practice and what does that look like for our ELA staff. Again, they meet regularly once a week on a grade level team, but they don't meet 6 through 8. So we have some areas of improvement that we need to improve on. This will allow for that, and this process will hopefully in the long run allow all of our teachers to improve curriculum for all of our students. Last one is administration and staff will continue to learn about and implement responsive classroom, focused on building a positive community and using a proactive discipline approach. Implementation will be done by utilizing Bulldog Power Hour at the end of the day. So that 40-minute period, approximately half is curriculum needs, students who may need some reteaching or extra help, and the other half is kind of an advisory within that Power Hour where we work on building a community. Myself and I think 6 other staff members went to Chicago for a week-long training. By far the best training I've ever been to. This responsive classroom, last year we used teacher language as a focus during early dismissal time. This is something that is not a curriculum. It's not a roll this out. It's a way of building culture and building a community within your school. And the feedback I'm getting of the teachers that are diving into this is very, very positive and kids become a part of that classroom and feel comfortable to communicate, like Lincoln Trail and MPE doing the morning meeting. That's a whole different, we don't have that time. We have a 5-minute homeroom, that's just not enough time. So we do at the end of the day, we post questions just like they do, a little different manner, but it's very, very rewarding, and kids are opening up and kids are becoming a part of our community. So, and that's, this time, this age is an emotional roller coaster. So we need to be positive, and we need to be, very, very a community where they feel comfortable. They're going to make mistakes, and they're going to have highs and lows. Probably more so in my building, that they feel comfortable coming and getting help from the teacher, getting help from the administrator. So those are the 3 goals for the junior high.
Any questions?
PBIS, that's something that I was always very impressed with at the high school when you were there, and you did a great job with that. I know Chad was a big part of that too, during that time. And then you left and you kind of continued to champion that cause. I'm glad to see us focusing on that at the junior high. I think that will be a big step forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, and during conferences, I did have an opportunity to talk to kids and teachers, and I think, just to echo what you said earlier about your schedule changes, I really do think that that's positive on all fronts.
Sure.
So I commend you for, it's not an easy thing to do, is dump everything out and try and put it back in the drawer and make it all fit. But I think you've done a good job, and I do think that the students and the staff all think that that was a beneficial move, so.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so the last guy to go, right? Thanks for having us talk a little bit about the high school improvement plan. Our process was similar as the other buildings. And maybe, I think I walk into a little bit different situation, that this process has been in place for a long period of time. With Mr. Chief being in charge of the building and then the consistency that we had, there's kind of been a modeling of what needs to be done. And really, we started in the spring having conversation and then transition with me into the principal's position, kept it going. We have a division head retreat every summer, which the school improvement plan is a focus of. We involve district administrators, of course, the division heads. Counselors is something new that we've enacted this year, as we're having weekly counselor meetings, which has been beneficial for our building to get their feedback, because they see a lot of things and talk to a lot of different kids. Of course, we involved our teaching staff, and then at the high school, there's multiple resources of data that are out there, from what's available in the Homework Report Card to different social emotional surveys, and that all helped drive the creation of our plan and our goals. Goal number 1 is our social emotional goal, where we really feel like we want to help our students improve their social emotional well-being. And that's across the board, from maybe test taking to stuff they deal with at home, they deal with on a personal level, things like that. So one of the things that we're most excited about is our staffing. We brought back a counselor's position this year and added Kevin Flores from Urbana. He's been a great addition. And we also added a half-time social worker that is split with the junior high. Heather Johnson is her name. And so we've really worked hard to bring those people on board and then collaborate with the addition of these new staff. How are we going to best utilize them and try to come up with programs and ideas that can help. So a few things that we're building off of course, I think a lot of people are familiar with our freshman mentoring program. That continues to be stable for us as a go-to for our freshmen and getting them off to a good start. Last year, we implemented our school safety classes that really focused on the ALICE curriculum, among other things. This year, that has expanded to cover such topics as bullying, healthy relationships, etc. So I think that those are programs that we are having in place. Our new social worker is working in the alternative education building and doing group classes with kids in the alternative education program, addressing a wide variety of needs, simple things as how to do your laundry, to deal with how to open a checking account, some things that maybe they just don't normally get. We are sending out a survey to students on Monday, actually, on Veterans Day, where they'll get it, and we're going to try to gather, and our counselors and social workers put that survey together. That survey that we're going to take that data and hopefully drive and develop curriculum to attack. We feel like there's maybe a gap in that sophomore advisory or a block of time that we can implement programs from what that survey tells us to get them more ready for their junior year. And take a look at that. Within that block of time, we see group work being a possibility. For example, students are dealing with grief. We might have a breakout session for kids that want to sign up for a grief group, or test anxiety, or whatever, so they know that they're not alone and they can have those resources if they want them. And then one of the things I'm probably most excited about, with the assistance of Dr. Rummel, we've started our restorative practices team. We have a group of staff that are going through training on our early out days where we're working with the trainer who's training us, and then we'll go back and work with the staff on implementing restorative practice. We continue to implement. We started down that road last year as a building, but we continue to grow on that, and it's gaining a lot of traction in our building. And I think people are starting to see the positive effect it can have for our students with restorative practice team. And then we're trying to improve our attendance rate. We are down 2% from last year. We wanted from chronic absenteeism. Last year we were so the year before we were 24%. We're at 22%. Mr. Bailey's done a good job. He's been proactive from the get-go, contacting families with a letter that he wrote and sent to families just notifying them their child was chronically absent. And some families just don't even realize that they are, whether they go on vacations, wherever it may be. As Dr. Rumley explained, the definition of what that looks like. And then another thing that we're trying to measure is we're really big at the high school and making sure students are connected. And so we use the piece from the 5 Essential Survey, School Connectedness, 54, which is an average score. And it's not terrible, but it's one we feel like we want to improve because, I mean, our goal at high school, honestly, it's hard to achieve, but we'd like to have 100% of our students feel connected to the high school in some way, shape, or form in some activity. So we're trying to improve that number. Goal number 2 is our SAT goal. And really what we're trying to dive into this one is we're looking at, there are 4 categories, if you look in the Illinois report card, that get measured in English and math, and the 4 categories are partially meeting, approaching, meets, and exceeds. And really the subgroups that we want to take a look at are the partially meeting and approaching subgroups, and then we want to break that down further, and within those subgroups, we want to take a look at our students with IEPs and our students that are low SES, and we want to improve that. We feel like while our numbers are good compared to the rest of the state, it's an area if we look for growth just here within our own 4 walls, that's the area that we want to try to attack. So some of the things that we're doing there is we've restructured how our students with IEPs are receiving SAT prep. We've changed that up a little bit to get a little better teacher-student ratio in that time to try to help them. And then we're also using, trying to do a better job of looking what the PSAT 9 and now 8, so 8, 9, and 10 are going to give us so we can get a better handle on the students and try to prep them for the future. And then we're also, our teachers are taking a look at the practice results throughout the year so we can try to do a little bit better job, I don't want to say targeting, but maybe tailoring or being more specific, being more intentional how we help students in those subgroups that we talked about. Goal number 3 is our lengthy goal, our wordy one, and basically I'll sum it up as like this. We feel like that we do a great job at the high school of preparing kids for, this is our college and career readiness goal. So on the college side, we really do a great job. You know, a lot of our students, the feedback that we get, they come back, and of course Mahomet's really rigorous and our rigor is really good and it's really tough, but we get kids that come back and say, wow, we're really ready for college. And so now our goal is how can we be on the career side? How can we help students be ready for a career? And we have a lot of really good things in place, but we feel like there's some things that we can do there to help with that. So our goal, staffing and collaboration. Kevin Flores, our new guidance counselor, has some experience in this area. So we are working to provide, he's working with our staff and providing some opportunities. We're also working we have some existing programs in place. So we work with the Education for Employment. It's through Parkland College. There's a bunch of schools that work through that, and then they have the ECCA program. So we work with them to try to provide options for our kids in areas that we don't offer at the high school. For example, like automotive, criminal justice. Parkland is actually rolling out an education an education class or ed classes where students that want to go into education can get an early start on that. So we're trying to do a better job of partnering with them. We have a program we call Career Cruising that our kids go through. We're trying to do a better job. There's a lot of resources with Career Cruising, And I think we're trying to do a better job of, okay, tapping into the potential that it has and making it more relevant for our kids. We're also looking at, Jennifer Worley does a great job with her STEAM night. It was last year was the first year for that, and we're expanding upon that, using something that's already in place, to build on that. And Kevin and the rest of our teachers in the CT department are working with her to expand that. New programs. So really excited about working with Dr. Rummel on competency-based education. We've applied for that waiver. And that will allow students, if they can proficiency out of certain classes, and it might gain them more opportunities. This is probably down the road a little bit, but there's a group of teachers, group of staff meeting on competency-based education and what that's going to look like for us. So I think that's an exciting thing that we can do. A thing that might fall under competency-based education is Jennifer Worley's had a bunch of talks with the local labor unions about developing a certificate class. So say if a student goes through our construction program or they go through our welding program, they come out with a certificate that makes them, won't get them into the union, but it makes them more marketable to the union and gives them a leg up on other students that they're competing against. And it might give them the confidence to go ahead and say, you know, this is a career I can go to. So that those certificate programs are something we're taking a look at. And then the Illinois PACE framework is what the state has come out and said it's a set of indicators for each grade level that we're going to have to report on each student at the high school. So at freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, we have to check certain boxes, and some of that's self-reporting by the students. All students will have to go through this to talk about college and career readiness. So that'll be the framework in which we kind of start to measure where we're succeeding in some of our goals in this area. Questions?
You talked about restorative practices a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just elaborate on that a little more for those of us who maybe aren't as familiar with what that was about?
Sure. So restorative practices is high level. There's a matrix that they use, and probably the term that we use a lot around between Mr. Bailey and myself with students is high level of support and high level accountability. And so, you know, it's trying to get students to recognize when they go through really anything, whether it be the classroom or sometimes in our situations in discipline, where students, you know, how did that make you feel? How do you think that made the other person feel? We'll sit down if we have situations where there's conflict between two students, we'll put them both around the table and moderate that so they get firsthand knowledge of like, oh, my action had this response from that student. That's why that student got mad at me. You know, so they understand to process some of those feelings.
I have a question for you. When you said that Illinois PACE framework, Mr. Benedict, the students, like they assess where the information that they got then each year?
So there'll be different schools, and so we get career cruising through the EFE. The EFE is possibly looking at making a change, a different software change, which would then, it's called Zello, and it would then allow us to use that option to record the Illinois PACE framework, okay? So for example, there are things, there might be, did you hold a summer job? Mm-hmm. So that's gonna be self-reported by the student, you know, as far as that shows that then they've held a job or career ready. So there'll be certain things on there that they do in school, but then a lot of stuff, there's some stuff that's out of school as well.
That's a good way to capture it.
Mm-hmm.
Glad to see the focus on career ready. I think, you know, for years, we've had big emphasis behind the college ready. And while we're not perfect, we do a pretty good job of that. And good to see some of the focus on career ready for those students that, you know, that's the direction that's best for them to go.
Speaking of career ready, just a suggestion, no pressure. If you want participation, just hold that checkbook balancing class for parents.
Yeah. Good suggestion.
How do you get some of those, you know, I love this goal number 3, but how do you get some of those students who are just focusing on college to experience some of that balance that they need just to grow in life and, you know, gain some of that practical information, that practical knowledge that they can get through, say, a construction class or, you know, I don't even think most kids leaving school can even know how to check the oil in their car, you know what I mean? So I don't see any of them doing them at the gas station anymore. Just simple things like that. How do we encourage those students to get a little broader look at life in general?
I think that comes back to, if we back up to the social emotional goal first, I think there's such a, you know, like the race to the top, and you know, one of the things I think we'll do, you know, with the social emotional goal is I think we'll start to see, like I sit down and have lunch with kids all the time, and it's amazing how many times they check their phone to see if some teacher's updated a test. You know, like they check Skyward just constantly. And while that is a good resource, if they're able to do that, that's also a problem in itself. So it's definitely a mindset that we have to shift. You know, that, you know, there are some kids that should take 3 or 4 AP classes their senior year because they have lofty goals. If you want to get into an Ivy League school, you kind of have to go down that road or you're not going to get into the Ivy League school. Then there are those that, you know, that are going to Parkland, which is great, but you don't necessarily need to take 3 AP classes, you know, that you can find that balance in there. So I think a couple things. I think one, with our additional staff, that's going to help. I really think bringing back the guidance counselor position is going to allow us to have more individual talks with kids earlier on, whereas last time, you know, with the current model the way it was just trying to get through and just check the boxes and get schedules done. So I'm hopeful that that's going to help, and I'm hopeful that our survey indicates, and that we can go back, you know, in that sophomore year and start to lay that groundwork with some of the curriculum we're going to do with social emotional work to say, hey, it's okay to you don't have to take a full load your senior year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think too, this also lends to that connectedness that you're trying to establish, and that, you know, everybody wants to be known. Not everybody's going to be a star on the football team or the basketball team, and these opportunities allow people to be known in different ways and feel connected to the school.
Yeah.
So I applaud this goal. I think this is really good, and just definitely needs more work. Got to keep working at it.
Any other questions for Chad?
Thank you.
Can I just say a couple words? As I sit and listen to these plans, and I got a preview of them ahead of time and that type of thing, but if you didn't know better, you'd think you were listening to people who'd been in a principalship for 10 years. And I want everybody to remember that 3 of the 4 people here have been in their job for less than 6 months, and our veteran's been in his job for 1.5 years. And so I just have to say, I could not be prouder of them and our entire leadership team. I would hold them up to any team anywhere. This is just an exceptional group of leaders that are leading just amazing teachers and other staff members in our school district. So great job to all of you, and I think it just speaks to, first of all, we have such a wide range of student needs that walk into our doors every day. And each one of these school improvement plans, first of all, you saw a social emotional learning goal. There's a huge emphasis on that, because what we know now is that if we're not meeting those goals and the relationship piece with our students and also with each other, then learning just doesn't take place, and there's a lot of obstacles that get set that are barriers to learning. So we know that we've just got a wider and wider variety of students that walk through our door with varied needs, and those needs look different on every single day. And we see that firsthand when some of our offices are right here, and we see our youngest kids, and we see some of them struggle, and also some of them find successes, and that happens every single day as kids just come to us with, again, such a wide variety of needs. But I think these plans reflect not only a commitment to look at data and to look at data that helps us to inform instruction and to figure out what interventions and supports our best, but also to look at some of the things that are immeasurable. And sometimes when we think of school improvement plans, we want to have metrics and goals that are measurable, but there's a lot about our clients that we work with that you can't really measure. So it's important to remember that what we work with are people's kiddos, and we work with families. So again, great job to all of you, and we'll appreciate your work every day. And we've got some assistant principals out here in the audience too, so appreciate the whole team.
I think one of the things that struck me is that these all look like plans for connections, whether it be with the staff, whether it be with the students. I think connections is how you build a culture, and then the learning, when you have a culture that supports all of that, the learning, the whole process of having to do that becomes easier. So it really struck me that that attempt at connections is in the forefront of all of the buildings, and I think that that is definitely going to lead to the success of the students and the staff. And so I was really happy to see that, because it's easy to do class ranks and numbers that are a little bit easier to get at. It's hard to measure those emotional and those connections, but the fact that that's what struck me as the focus, I think is really, it made me happy to be sending my kids through this district. So thank you for that attention to that harder intangible.
I agree, I love that the students are thought of as whole people, not just someone who scores an SAT well or gets their math score. It's about them as whole kids, so I really appreciated all 4 plans.
One thing that really jumped out this year is I think every one of you mentioned team and involving the staff in your buildings, the teachers and all the support staff. And, we've had, in my mind, we've had above average administrators for a long time here. I think our track record would probably support that statement. But someone mentioned that a lot of times the goals in the past, I think, have kind of been done in isolation. And we're not doing that now, but we're involving people. And that's just super, that's gonna pay dividends down the road. That's gonna get us where we need to be. That's why we've got better culture right now in this building. And that's what's gonna move us forward. So thank you all for taking that approach and for doing that. That's just great.
I feel like we should be clapping for
And we share that with your people that help you do that, people that come to work every day.
Okay. In a minute, we need to go into closed session on a couple issues. We had something else, did we? I can't remember.
Not that I'm
You were, okay.
thinking of.
Okay, all right, good deal. All right, so tonight, a closed session, I'm just so overwhelmed by our leaders, I thought we had something about it. Closed session is necessary tonight for number 1, the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body, including hearing testimony on complaint lodged against an employee to determine its validity. And we're also adding item number 9 as in the closed session list, student discipline issues to tonight's closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session at this time for those reasons?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Hennessy,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Keith, Giles,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
McComb.
Yes, we'll take 10 minutes to clear the room, and we do
I
not
know,
anticipate
exactly.
any action
That's what I
yet.
feel.
But thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to our building.
It's the hardest part of my day, trying to figure out what to do.
Right.
First word to say.
Oh, darn it. Darn it.
I know. I know.
Good job. I see what I feel.
Thanks,
Bless you.
How are you? I don't know what you heard y'all do. And it's really like, I'm in shock because